Hey guys, this is John. Welcome to another Climbing the Bot Ladder video. Those who have been following my channel the past couple months may know that I recently joined this site, Chessiverse, as a co-owner. This is a platform where we have over 500 human-like bots. We're trying to create the most human-like bots that you can play in chess. And thank you to many of you who've joined or checked out the site. We really appreciate it. So today, I'm actually showing you guys a video that I made for premium members on the site. I've been sending out weekly premium videos where I play against the bots and just offer tips and general advice, talk through my games. And I thought this game in particular made a perfect climbing the bot ladder game as well, because I played a pretty high-rated bot, and it turned out to be quite instructive. So hope you guys enjoy, and thanks to our premium members in advance. You guys are kind of getting a little double dip here on this one, but I wanted to show you guys what the premium videos look like on Chessiverse, and I thought really all the viewers of my channel would enjoy this. So do check out the site, and if you have any questions, just let me know. All right, thanks guys. Let's do another quick match today and see who we get. This is my favorite button on the site, the quick match button. Okay, we get Marina Panova. I'm not sure if I played her before. She opens with C4, and I'm sitting at 2101 rating. Now, against C4, I tend to do a few different things. C6 sometimes, C5, but I'm going to play E5. This is a move I used to play as a youngster quite a bit. It's basically a reverse Sicilian. And Marina is playing this fianchetto variation. I'm going to do the same thing. Yeah, and I had a victory against an international master when I was probably 15 or 16 at a big open tournament in the US. And I played this setup that I'm playing here. So playing the pawn up to F5 and then getting in the knight behind it, hoping later to have some sort of initiative on the king side with this pawn formation. But Marina is playing this knight GE2, E3, D4 setup, forcing an early clash of pawns in the center. Now, I wonder if I should take, or no, not take. I wonder if I should push or let white take, I should say. So I probably don't want to take myself and give up that pawn in the middle, but it's tempting to grab space, and it's also tempting to simply castle here, because I wouldn't mind, I think, if there was an exchange in the center. So maybe I'll do that. It looks a little more flexible than playing E4 right away. So let's go for castles. And she plays B3. So clearly looking for a fianchetto of the other bishop. There's some Dutch defense-like similarities here too, with black having played F5. So I'm trying to summon my inner Simon Williams, who is the player that comes to mind when I think of the Dutch defense. Yeah, I don't know. B3, I can keep the tension longer, but it's hard to develop if I do. Moves like bishop E6 aren't ever really playable because of D5. Maybe I could play queen E8, although that's maybe more of a situation in a Dutch where you can try to send the queen to H5, so I'm not sure it's appropriate here. I think at this point I will play E4. Just grab some space. Maybe white will undermine the center with F3, but I wouldn't mind taking. Yeah, she does play F3. I think I'm probably going to capture here. Let's do it. And I'll try to play for control of this E4 square now, I think, because I would really like to prevent white from playing pawn E4 herself. So let's go rook E8. And the knight jumps up. Okay, so white has a nice grip on the D5 square, no doubt. But I feel pretty good about this position. I could perhaps make use of this E4 square, but what's the rush? I'm thinking maybe bishop D7, maybe try to complete development. I'm not in love with the bishop on D7. It doesn't seem too actively placed there, but it's okay. Another move that crosses my mind is G5. But I don't know if I want to potentially weaken my king side yet and encourage this knight to jump to D5. So let's play bishop D7, see how things develop. And bishop D2. Okay, so no fianchetto anymore, which makes sense since the pawn on E3 would be loose. So where do I go from here? I like my position. It seems to have promise. but I feel I need to make my pawns work for me. My minor pieces are all out. I have a rook on e8. It's hard to find a job for the queen and the king side, or the queen side rook, I should say, at the moment. But I feel like I do want to mobilize my pawn somehow. Maybe even moving this knight and playing c6. But I can't do that yet because the pawn on b7 hangs. Rook b8 kind of comes to mind in order to prepare this move. Yeah, even if white gets a chance to play queen c2, I don't really fear e4 because after multiple trades, the pawn on d4 could very well fall. So do I go rook b8 and then knight e7 and maybe work my way up to g5? It's kind of a long maneuver, but it makes sense. I'm going to go for it. Rook b8. Very rarely would you want to put a rook behind a pawn like this directly when you don't have plans of moving that pawn very soon. You know, ironically, now that white has played knight d5, I could think about b5. But I might go ahead and follow through with this knight e7 move. Start rotating my knight over to maybe even the king side if white doesn't take it. Yeah, let's go knight e7. Challenge that knight on d5. Okay. I feel this position is balanced for the moment. I don't think either side has a whole lot here yet. So bishop c3. So this takes the bishop off of the pawn on e3. I don't want to play g5 now because that invites knight h5, hitting my bishop. And I definitely don't want to lose this dark square bishop. So maybe c6. d5 is not yet a thing. So c6 looks constructive. Bishop c6 leaves this hole on e6. Then again, white can't play d5, so bishop c6 may make some sense. But I could regret that later if ever white gets a chance to play d5, like let's say queen d2 or something in preparation for d5. Yeah, this knight is annoying on f4. Now that g5 runs into h5, knight h5. I'm feeling a little cramped by virtue of this maneuver. Maybe king g7, just to have my bishop a little better protected, but that doesn't seem right either. Bishop c6, try to trade. I just foresee this knight coming into e6. I don't like it. I do not like that. If I play c6, I'm not really working up to d5. Yeah, so I've got myself in a bit of a cramped position at this point. Have to figure out a decent path forward. So is g5 really that bad? g5, knight h5, bishop h8, and then let's say my next move is knight g6 after that. Maybe I'm inviting bishop d5 in that line. This is an unlimited time control game, so I can pause here, take my time. My lack of time. The non-existent time. B5, try to open a front on the queen side. I don't really see what that achieves, though. Even if I get to take the white pawn, we get a swap. It doesn't seem to do much. Knight c6. Boy, I'm having a really tough time here. I think I'm going to play c6. c6, but what am I doing on queen d2? Quite simply working up to d5, because I can't play d5 myself. I end up losing a pawn. Knight c6. I might have to play knight c6, even though it looks non-constructive. But there too, what am I playing next? Queen e7 might run into knight d5. I do hit the pawn on e3, but I'm not seeing a follow-up after that. Tough spot here, guys. I'm not sure what to play. I think I'm worse, and maybe clearly worse. Could I do something creative like king h8, knight g8? Maybe that's not bad. I'll try that. I need to get this knight in place somehow, but I don't like going back to c6. I just don't see what the plan is for the knight there. So yeah, let's do this. Knight g8. And I'm dreaming of moving this bishop and playing knight f6. But now is white going to play for e4 before I have a chance to do that? Maybe. But I think that's okay, and I think I have to be all right with that transformation. So bishop g7. Yeah, and Marina does go for e4. You know, I'm always assessing the humanness of the bots, because that is a big goal for us here at Chessiverse, is to have the most human-like bots possible. And I do like how white is playing this. Strong opponent, and she's playing moves that make sense. They make a lot of sense. I wish I would have anticipated a couple of them, but they make sense. So e4, I probably have to take that pawn. And I'm just scanning for potential tactical ideas that I need to have in mind defensively. Like, can white think about sacking on g6 soon? Let's say I play knight f6 here. Is bishop takes g6 a concern? I don't think so. Nor does knight f6, or knight g6 seem to be a concern. H takes g6, bishop takes g6. My bishop on g7 is doing a great job of defending. So I think we'll play knight f6. Attack that bishop on e4. And now I want to maybe trade and try to relieve some of the pressure. So rook takes e1, rook takes e1. Maybe queen g8, trying to make way for rook e8. There's this issue of the pawn on b7 still in those lines, but something I can work up to. Maybe c6 right away. Although I do think d5 is still likely coming. Bishop f5, maybe try to go knight e4. Seems a bit optimistic. Okay, let's take. And queen g8 was my plan here. Oh, this looks so claustrophobic. I feel like I'm crowding into the elevator here. Let's do it. Rook e7 doesn't seem to matter much because I have rook e8. Maybe I should have looked at an exchange sack there, like rook takes g7, but okay, it's not forthcoming. So rook e8. Is there anything with knight takes g6? I don't see how knight takes g6 would work out for white. My bishop is potentially overloaded, but I don't believe that's going to work out. Rook e8, knight takes g6, pawn takes g6. Let's say bishop takes f6. I could even just take back and on queen h6 play queen g7 because my rook on e8 is supported by the bishop. But I can also throw in rook takes e1 somewhere too. So yeah, let's go rook e8. Okay, all right, so white plays rook f1. Now that does ratchet up the pressure on the f file, but it gives me the e file. Oh, there's perilous stuff here though. So let's say I optimistically play knight e4 at this point. Can you see why that would lose? You want to pause your video and calculate knight e4. What happens after that? Okay, so if knight e4, bishop takes e4, rook takes e4, knight takes g6 check. That's where knight takes g6 could hurt. Forces pawn takes g6, and then the queen lands on h6. Bishop can't take because of the pin. I had to play queen h7. And then I think bishop takes f8, king g8, rook f8, checkmate. And I'll show that line after the game. So now knight takes g6 is a big threat. I'm thinking I might want to play a reinforcement move like bishop f5. What about knight g4 as well? Does knight g4 make sense? Try to pivot the knight to e5 and have the knight from g4 help guard the h6 square. Yeah, I think these are my candidate moves in this position. Knight g4 or bishop f5. I kind of like knight g4 a little bit better. Although knight g4, bishop takes g7, queen takes g7, knight e6. I might just have to be okay with that. Bishop takes e6, pawn takes e6, rook takes e6. As long as there's no double attack that hurts me. think I can live with that. There's bishop takes b7, but seems all right. So knight g4, let's just double check that there's no tactic that's going to really hurt me. And if h3, I can pivot the knight to e5. And that should help a lot. That helps reinforce g6. I don't see white landing any sacrifice on that square. So knight e6, knight g4, knight e6. Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes. It's probably okay. Okay, let's go knight g4. So I'm trying to angle for squares, trying to put this knight on e5, maybe go to e3. Bishop h3, not a move I thought about, but makes sense. So now bishop takes g4, bishop takes g4, knight takes g6 is back on the agenda. This does give me time to maybe initiate a trade and play queen g7, though. I do like the look of that. Moreover, I don't know what else I would do here. Knight e5, I think bishop takes e5 is trouble. So probably bishop takes bishop. Bishop takes c3 and then play queen g7. Yeah, let's do it. Okay. All right, and we get a queen trade. I think I'm pretty happy by that. And I'm controlling the e6 square. Ooh, now, I thought about this, but I didn't think this would be good for white. I wonder if I can get in to some situation where I have a chance of outplaying Marina coming up. So I got to take with the bishop, that's clear, because otherwise my knight on g4 hangs. And now after pawn takes, my knight is under attack. Knight e5 looks like such a juicy pivot. Bring the knight to the e5 square, which guards f7 as well. And I'd love to slowly win this e-pawn. Okay, I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it, but that would be the plan. And right now I'm just contemplating if knight f6 makes any sense. Knight f6 looks a lot less natural, so let's go to the e5 square. It's beautiful to have a knight on a square like this, centralized, protected by a pawn, unassailable. White cannot approach this knight and kick it. There's no pawn on either side that can come up and attack it. Even if white got their king to the center, it would have no effect. And king f2, so Marina is trying to centralize her king for the endgame, but I believe I can check with the rook, trade rooks, play king f6, and I should be in the driver's seat in this ending. Probably close to winning. Probably close to winning. Question is, do I... Yeah, I think I trade rooks. I think we're quite happy to trade rooks. Ooh, and she centralizes the king, but in allowing the trade, I can play king f6 and hit the pawn. There's also maybe knight g4, either right now or after trading rooks. But knight g4, I don't know if I want to go after that h-pawn. I could see my knight getting trapped. Like if I ever, let's say in the simplest form, we trade rooks, knight g4 check, king e4, knight takes h2, there's bishop e2. And that knight might struggle to get in the game, get back in the game. I'd probably have to play h5 and do some sort of rescue operation. So let's think. So trade rooks, king f6, force bishop h3. And then from there, what's my next step to winning the pawn? Knight maneuver? But white's king can come up to d5 in the meantime. But then I have knight b4. Yeah, that should be good. Should be good for me. Okay, so let's trade rooks. Play king f6. Ooh, and white does not defend the pawn. I'm surprised. I thought bishop h3 would be played. So maybe the bot is judging that they have better chances grabbing some space, or maybe that it's inevitable that they would lose that pawn, which is true. I think that's probably true. But I think bishop h3 would have made me work more. Probably was going to play knight c6 there and gradually go take it. So now let's capture. This still isn't going to be simple. I'm up 1 pawn, but I need to gradually make progress here. So now I'm thinking where white's going to bring their king in, because they can step up to really any of these 3 squares, most likely e4, f4 next. Let's play king e7. King e7, king f4, though. Because I'm not sure, let's say king e7, king f4. Not sure I want to allow king g5, although I do have knight f7 against that, I suppose. It's probably okay. King f6 as well. Probably not a huge difference between these moves, but just thinking out loud a bit. Let's go king f6. King f6, king d5. Or sorry, king e4 trying to come into king d5. So I can play c6, but then bishop c8 is arguably a little annoying. Okay, king e7. I'll try to stay symmetric with white's king. It's a really close call here, I think. And I'm not sure further thinking is going to help clarify it for me. So, all right, b6, that's obvious. Yeah, white can put up decent resistance here because I have less space. That's for sure. So g4, pressing forward. h6, try to go for g5. Just sit tight. Maneuver the knight. Hard to maneuver the knight and attack the white pawns because the rook pawns are what I'd like to get at, given that they're furthest away from white's pieces, but not simple to get there. Knight c6, knight b4, maybe, but I think white could play a3, for example. And I'm hesitant to move my knight away from this awesome e5 square. King f6 invites g5. That might not be that bad, but also seems like it could be premature. Boy, not easy. Not easy to convert here. Knight d7, maybe? Try to screen white out. Could they trade and play king f4? Nah, that would probably lose. I was thinking if they could try to quickly bring their king in. But they might play knight d7, king f4. And I'm somewhat scrambling to prevent their king from getting in. Seems like I'm going to have to get c6 and d5 in fairly soon. But white's not going to make that easy for me. So let's say I play c6. White can play king f4 or king e4. Just sort of sit on the position. Probably going to have to reroute this knight at some point. h6 is another move that came to mind. That was actually the first move that came to mind for me. But I'm not sure on g5 if I even want to trade pawns. I'm going to go c6. Let's play this move. So starting to push pawns on light squares. All right, so I can play d5 now if I want. I do have to be wary of this bishop getting back to g8. But for now, I don't see an easy way for white to do that. So d5. It's also knight d7. If I want to try to slowly get at this bishop. But knight d7, I suppose, white can play bishop b7. And then if knight b8, trying to trap the bishop, bishop back to c8. I don't think I can trap it. It's cute, though. It's a cute try to approach the bishop like this. Could play king d8 right away, but then bishop h3, I suppose. So d5, I think, is what I'm going to do. Let's go for it. Technical endgame here, folks. So if king d4, I can play king d6. Yeah, this move didn't concern me. Bring the king up. And if king d4, probably knight f3. We'll just win the game. Bishop a6. Okay. So next step in the plan would be to get my king further up. Ideally, if I could get my king to e5. I think we're getting to the point where it might make sense to move this knight away from the beautiful e5 square. And that sometimes happens when you're gradually converting a position like this with a nice knight. At some point, you might have to move that knight away from the dream square. So I think knight c6 with the plan of king e5. Grab space. And if I get control of that fourth rank, I think white's going to be busted. I know they're not going to make it easy for me, though. Maybe bishop b5. I could play king c5 for that matter. But I'm just wondering about king f4 then. Maybe I could play king d4 at that point. You know, there's also king c5, b4. King takes b4, king d4. Then I probably go take this pawn on h4. That should win, but I'm not 100% sure. So knight c6 is the move that really speaks to me here. But I'm just double checking because knight d7 is arguably similar. Knight d7, because white can only prevent me from checking their king out for so long. Checking their king away from the center. Probably these moves are pretty similar. Maybe knight d7 gives me a little more flexibility, though, because I'm thinking if I can send the knight to e6, which requires a couple moves, 3 moves actually, then I can definitively control d4 and f4. So if I have the knight on e6, controlling d4, f4, then king e5 is inevitable. And I think the only question is, can white bother me with their bishop somehow? Like snake their bishop back to attack that pawn on h7, but it seems very slow. Okay, let's try it. Let's go knight d7. Retreat to gain ground. Okay, and I'm going to get in king e5. White evidently wanted to stop knight c5, but they're inviting my king up. And I do believe I should take white up on that. Still might go for the knight maneuver because it's likely, it's likely the bishop was going to attack the knight. I don't think there's any rush to play d4 check. But knight f8, bishop e8. Knight e6, bishop f7. And that's where I got to be a little cautious about this bishop getting back to attack this pawn. Knight f8, bishop e8. Knight e6, bishop f7. Let's say d4 check at that point. Maybe king f3. d3, king e3. I'm trying to think if I can get my knight back and take some pawns. I think that should be okay. I think I more or less have to play knight f8 here anyways. I don't think I'm going to retreat my king. So let's go for it. Yeah, and Marina plays the most annoying move. That makes sense. So knight e6. Let's do it. And now on bishop f7. Okay, so I can always retreat the knight to f8 if I absolutely need to. But I'm thinking I now use this pawn as a distraction, and I try to win the kingside pawns. And what's the best way to do this? Do I play knight f4 right away and try to threaten a fork? Or do I push the d pawn directly? Because white can only ignore that d pawn for so long. Bishop g8. Let's say d4 check, king f3, d3, bishop g8, d2, king e2. Then maybe knight f8 and try to run my king in. That's a little close for comfort, though. Not sure I like that. There's also knight d4, knight f5 to go after this pawn. and have the knight protect. Maybe that's what I should do. Knight d4, bishop g8, knight f5 check. I think I like that better. I think guaranteeing the elimination of the h-pawn is nice. There's also knight c2 ideas, but yeah, let's go with knight d4. Bishop g8 as forecast. Okay, give the check. And notice how much territory I control along that 5th rank. So all these squares are under my control, which is very, very nice. Okay, I'm going to take the pawn with check now. And on king g4, probably knight back to f5. Bishop takes h7, and then knight to e7. Any sense going to g2? Probably not. Yeah, so do this. Oh, and actually, I didn't realize this, but the bishop is now trapped. I was only doing this to defend the pawn on g6, but in fact, I'm trapping the bishop. Okay, so now what immediately comes to mind is, can I just treat this like a king and pawn ending? So this is a little shortcut you can use in endgames where there's piece trap situations or you have one of your opponents severely restricted, some key piece in the game. So could I just play king d4 here and treat this almost like a pure king and pawn versus king? Because the queenside pawns don't really matter. So king d4, king e2, king c3, king d1, and I'm going to put white in zugzwang eventually. Yeah, I think that's the easiest way to win. I could play king f5, king takes h6, go after the bishop, but I actually like king d4. I think that's very clean. It continues to box out that white king too. Although king d4, king f4, king e5, sorry, king d4, king f4, king c3, king e5, d4. There's king f6, huh? Attack my knight, because that would really be unfortunate if I had to move the knight and allow bishop takes g6. Okay, maybe king f5 is the better thing to do here. Oh, okay, I could play d4, though, too, to treat this like a pure king and pawn ending. Yeah, why not d4? Because this is winning, too, even if we're not gaining a key square on white. Yeah, that should be winning. Also, b5. I could play b5 if I want to. Maybe b5 is the most accurate of all. Take away white's tempi on the queen side. b5. Ooh, yeah, I think I'm going to go for that. So same principle, though, trying to treat this like a king and pawn ending. Because this is all canceled out if I want. So b5, and if ever white plays a3, I can always play a6. But I also don't have to rush that move. So let's say b5, king e3, d4 check, king d3, king d5. And then I'll get into the c4 square if allowed. So white might play a3, but then I hit him with a6 at that point. And then we're just walking white down. Just double checking that this is all trapped. I'm not missing anything. I'm not worried about a sacrifice. Yeah, let's go b5. Probably all these moves win that I've talked about, but I'm trying to show it in an instructive way and also a way in which I might play this in a tournament game, just to absolutely make it clear that we should win this. This one involved a little calculation. Yeah, a6, and now white's out of pawn moves. They're going to have to retreat their king. But not a whole lot of calculation. You know, nothing that you guys couldn't handle as well. So king e4 or king c4, either one is good. Usually you want to take the opposition, but both moves are winning. Yeah, there's no danger of stalemate situations, are there? No, I don't think so. So let's go king e4. D3. Okay, and the bishop hangs, but king d1, king e3. I wonder if I could actually engineer some pseudo stalemate and then bring the knight in and check white out of the queening square. But This is going to accelerate white's defeat. Yeah, now I would suspect she plays 1 or 2 more moves and then resigns. Maybe resigns when it's clear that I'm going to promote. It's always interesting when the bots resign, which is a setting, by the way. If you want the bots to play till checkmate, they will. I have on resignations, so I prefer to let the bot decide. Okay, let's give the check. So king d1, clearly not king d3. Don't stalemate them. We're just going to move our knight. Force Marina's king out. And then go for promotion. Again, no stalemate. And there's the resignation. Okay, so as soon as I got the queen. Okay, did this game feel like playing a human? This is a new prompt that we have at the end of games. We're trying to make these bots more human-like. So any feedback you can give us related to this, please do click that button afterwards. And I would say, yes, this game felt like a human. I thought the only move in which I would have liked to see the bot play differently was that bishop h3 move. I think the bot played h4 instead. So it was right. Let's click yes, first of all. It was this move here, 33. Allowing me to play king takes e6 without a fight. I think a human at that rating level would have played bishop to h3 instead. So that was the only thing. Pretty instructive game. Pretty instructive game, I gotta say. So let's take a look at this one and see what we can learn. And I've mentioned this before, but we're building out the analysis tool here on Chessiverse. So now you can not only click through the moves, but you can toggle in the engine. And if you click the little gear right next to the engine, oh, I should move my camera actually so you guys can see this. Where should I put my camera? Let's put it up here for now. No easy place to put it that doesn't quite obscure things, but yeah, so this is the engine toggle. When you're in your history or your insights, you can click to this from the game like I did as well. So just click the toggle on here. You can select the number of lines that you want. I have 3 as a default, but if you want just 1 engine line showing, you can do that. You can drag up to 5. So this is stuff you might be familiar with from Lichess, chess.com as well. And there's the eval arrows. So these arrows are indicating the top 3 moves. And the number of arrows will, of course, change based on how many lines that I'm selecting. And one thing, too, I mentioned this in my last premium video. So Jonathan, our developer, he coded in eval boxes, which I think is pretty cool. So it shows you visually on the board in these boxes what the engine thinks the evaluation is. And this is sort of a beta feature. He's playing around with the implementation of it and how exactly it displays, but kind of a cool touch. I'll probably leave those off for now, but yeah, so I felt pretty good about this game other than that jam I got into in the opening. So let's see. Here I was debating whether I should push or let white come to me. I ended up castling, which the computer thinks is okay. It's giving white a modest advantage, but I'm not terribly surprised by that evaluation because I have pushed my f-pawn, and the computer tends not to like that. But okay, e4 seems fine. f3 undermining. Rook e8. Yeah, maybe around here there's some improvement as far as my setup, because I do think within another 3 or 4 moves I'm appreciably worse. More so than the current evaluation. So yeah, the engine's saying maybe knight e7 right away. Because this knight, it's a little hard to describe, but this knight doesn't stand very well on c6. All of its forward progress is inhibited. Aside from this knight b4 move, which seems like a shot in the dark, but I can't go to e5. I can't take this pawn on d4. It's blocking my c pawn. It contributes to the general cramping on the queen side that's going on. So I've talked about how in closed and semi-closed positions, there's often this phenomenon on the queen side where the knight and the c pawn have a marriage, so to speak, and the pawn being the pawn being in front of the knight is usually a happy marriage, but the knight being in front of the pawn is usually a bad marriage, an unhappy marriage, because there's just this phenomenon in these closed and semi-closed positions, unlike open positions, where you want more pawn mobility, you want your pawns to be flexible, and having that knight in front of the pawn can often inhibit that mobility. So white enjoys great mobility with their knight on c3 and good control of the fifth rank as well with this pawn on c4, but I don't really have the same thing going on. So yeah, maybe knight e7, knight b4, queen e8, interesting. Not rook e8 though. Rook e8 might be a slight mistake. Looks so natural though. But that's interesting. That was sort of my feeling in the game, because now this evaluation is creeping over a pawn. It's not, for most players, this isn't going to hurt you too much to play rook e8. And it's a move grounded in fundamental principles, right? Like take the half open file, put pressure on the pawn. But I don't think it actually solves anything about the dilemma I have coming up in a few moves. Okay, so that's very high level, but this looks like a constructive move, but it doesn't actually help me unwind the knight situation or figure out how I'm going to develop my queen side. Remember, I can't play bishop e6 because that instantly runs into a fork with d5. You always got to watch two minor pieces on the same rank with one square in between them. If that's the case, your opponent better not be able to come up and fork those two minor pieces. So yeah, I've made similar mistakes like this rook e8 move. It's hard for me to put into words, but basically it's postponing a difficult decision that I should probably address sooner, which is how to unwind my queen side. Yeah, and actually I'm looking at the lines here. So the engine recommends queen e8 and even knight d8. That's very interesting. Like let's say white plays bishop d2, knight d8. Maybe send the knight to e6 or f7. Yeah, because let's say I go to f7. Or maybe I throw in c6 first. Yeah. That looks like a much more constructive route, doesn't it? Knight g5, hit the bishop if I get this. Focus in on the e4 square. That looks like something much nicer. And I can't do that with the queen on d8. I think that's why it likes queen e8. Because when I play rook e8, my knight can't go to d8. It's interesting. I got to keep that route in mind. Those of you who are Dutch defense players, let me know if you were thinking about anything during this game. So queen e8, I think, is more flexible. Allows for knight d8. It's kind of cool. Queen e7 too, but queen e7, you always got to watch out for knight d5. So I think queen e8 is a little more position appropriate. So a bit of a nuance there in the opening. Yeah, bishop d7, arguably a similar move, postponing a difficult decision for me. Doesn't like bishop d2 as much. Actually says queen d2 to guard the pawn, and then bishop b2. So the engine wants white to fianchetto that bishop. Okay. All right, and rook b8 I think is okay. Preparing for knight e7. Ah, you know what? I don't think I considered knight e4 here at all. I don't know why. I'm not sure why I didn't look at knight e4, given that white just gave up control of that square. If you spotted that move, well done. I wasn't even thinking about it. I was thinking of contesting this knight on d5. But yeah, knight e4. Probably not takes, though, because I don't like allowing pawn takes. Attacking the knight and getting this grip on the e6 square. Engine seems to think this isn't so bad, but that looks kind of wrong to me. Same thing with knight takes, or not knight takes d5, knight g4. This crossed my mind, but didn't seem like I had the coordination to pull this off. I'm not even threatening to take on e3. Very interesting. Yeah, so I'm picking up a couple things, that queen e8 move and also just missing knight e4. So knight e7, we get this trade. Bishop c3. So I'm not that much worse, but it has potential to get bad. And I was really debating what to play here. This was probably my longest think of the game. Moves I was considering was G5, bishop C6, pawn C6. Looks like those are some of the better moves. Doesn't like king H8. So queen D2, okay. And then knight G8, rook AE1. These moves all make sense. Bishop G7. I admit this looks extravagant, but how does white hurt me? I'm going to guess that Marina missed something coming up. Okay, knight F6, develop and hit that bishop. So bishop G2, that was all played. Take, queen G8. So I'm cramped here, guys. And when you're in a cramped position, generally you want to try to trade and relieve that pressure. So I'm trying to make 1-for-1 trades. So trying to make way for rook E8. I'm not really in a position to play it yet, though, because if I got another move and played rook E8, the pawn on B7 would hang, remember. So D5 kind of solved that issue for me, but if white played some sort of neutral move, I probably would have had to play C6 next. Or maybe B5, the computer's even indicating. But D5, yeah, and here I was mentioning that I have to be very cautious about knight takes G6 stuff. So it doesn't work yet, but rook E8, rook F1. Yeah, this is where I think I mentioned a line that would be very easy to fall into. Let's say I go knight E4, trying to look for further trades. Bishop takes E4, rook takes E4, and then you can see this mate in 3 pop up, splat. Knight takes G6, check. H takes G6, queen H6, a pattern you must fix into your brain. This bishop pinned by their bishop on the long diagonal. Queen H7, and actually there's mate in 1. I think in my line I gave bishop takes G7 first, and then rook F8, but this would be beautiful actually. Rook F8 right away. And the poor bishop can't take either of these major pieces in this line, because that hero bishop on C3 is pinning. Nor can I play queen G8 even. That's beautiful. All 3 remaining white pieces involved in the attack. Gorgeous line. So yeah, that's an example of how I could lose this right away. So I played knight G4, which looks correct. Yeah, and I think the bot starts to go astray right around here. The engine wants it to play H3. And now note that there's no knight takes G6 because queen H6 is not a follow-up. My knight controls that square. So H3 makes sense, what the engine's suggesting, but that does give me a chance to play knight E5, pivot to this nice square. And here too, knight takes G6 isn't going to work for white because, for one thing, their bishop isn't participating towards my king anymore. There's a really solidly placed knight in the way. But still, it looks like this would have been the better path. H3, knight E5, and it wants to start playing on the queen side. I still can't take here because of this. So maybe trying to crawl forward on another flank. And admittedly, I am still kind of cramped here. White just controls more territory than me, so maybe work up to C5. Yeah. So Marina plays bishop H3, and what are we doing in cramped positions? We're trying to trade and relieve the congestion. And I was very happy to see a queen trade here. I think if I were playing white, I would have kept queens on the board. Yeah, this queen D2 move doesn't show an edge for white at this point. The game does look kind of even, but I think the queen trade helps me get my king to the center and clarifies the position even further. And I hate this next move by the engine, knight E6. In many ways, it's a very human-like move, but that's an instructive mistake. That's the sort of move that you might play out of inertia, thinking that you're still better or that you're still pressing in the position, or maybe you're just frustrated that you didn't land a tactic. But as soon as we take that knight and pivot the knight back to E5, it starts to become pretty clear that white is over their skis. White is overextended because this pawn, although it's a pass pawn, is very firmly blockaded, and this knight on E5 is running the show. I can't stress that enough. It controls the F7 square. It prevents white from ever supporting their E-pawn. Rook E1 would actually lose on the spot to knight F3. So now I can start gradually maneuvering maybe rook e7, move the knight away from the dream square to attack the pawn on e6, maybe get the king up to f6 if white ever plays the rook to e1 later. And probably I'm going to collect this pawn sooner or later. It might take a little while, but sooner or later that pawn's probably going to fall. Yeah, maybe we play on the queen side a little bit as well, but this pawn requires constant defense. And what white tried to do, bring up the king, was mistimed because I'm very happy to get the pair of rooks off the board too. That should, in theory, make my job easier in eventually winning this pawn. I can cross over to the f file easily, for one thing. So super instructive little sequence there. Even after I've made some constructive trades, white should be thinking about keeping some pieces on board, keeping some tension. And don't just play captures, checks out of inertia. You got to be willing to recognize the changing nature of a position and the shift in momentum. Because now we're in an endgame where only black should be able to win this. And white's only two remaining pieces are totally at bay now. One very defensively so, guarding this pawn. So super instructive there. Yeah, I think I would have probably played king e2 here if I were white, and then take with the king to keep the bishop tethered to the pawn, but it probably plays very, very similar. So maybe I can show coming up. So this swap happens. I go after the pawn. I didn't want to allow any scenario like this, where the knight gets corralled, although it's probably still winning. But it didn't seem necessary to do that. So king f6. Yeah, so this is where I was criticizing the bot for playing h4. So the way these bots work is, depending upon the rating of the bot, the higher rated, it's going to play, you know, top engine moves in many cases. So it probably sees h4 as one of the top moves. And in theory, I guess, according to the engine, h4 is a better chance than bishop h3. But I do think the more human move is bishop h3. It's hard to train the bots to do this, but I think over time, they will make moves like that more often. And already, a lot of the bots, like at this rating range especially, do play quite human-like, I believe. So, yeah, I would have liked to see that move, but know that that's something that we're working on, and that's one reason we're trying to get feedback from all these games to make them more human-like. But yeah, bishop h3 to defend the pawn, and then I probably would have started maneuvering. But how might this go? Just to show you guys, like knight e7, king d5, let's say. Yeah, and then king e7 to blockade, and then I'm ready to play c6, and finally knight takes c6. So yeah, that's actually not that complicated. Bishop h3, knight c6, trying to go knight d8, and white's over their skis, like I said. Feel free to use that expression, even though you may not live in a cold weather climate like me. You might not go skiing. But white's overextended, and it stands to reason they might try to bring their king up to defend the pawn, but then king e7. So there's a lot of pivoting in and out of blockading squares like this when you're working with a king and a knight against a king and a bishop. And really nice. And then we can play c6 next. Doesn't matter if white goes c5. Can play c6 anyways and then take, or even take right away and then take. And if white trades into this endgame down a pawn, they're going to gradually lose. They're going to gradually lose that king and pawn ending. So white played h4, and I was happy to seize the pawn. Yeah, bishop h3. And I feel like this should be a technical win, but it wasn't simple. I did have to think a little bit. King c6, g5, so trying to grab some space. Looks like it really dislikes g5. And actually that makes sense based on how the game went down, because once I got d5 in and I brought my king up, and especially when I got my king to the 5th rank, white's position did collapse. So yeah, maybe bringing the king up is a better chance, just to hinder d5. I think that tracks. King f4, what was I going to do? Probably king f6, or the engine suggesting knight f7 as well. King f6 makes a lot of sense to me. Just try to keep their king out. It does let white play g5. But here too, I feel like I'm going to gradually achieve d5. And I should be able to keep my king side safe enough. It's hard for white to get in with their king too, so yeah, that should win. So g5 played, I went d5, breaking out, trade. Remember, my king can always come up to d6 to help support. And yeah, I think this is just straight up lost now. I think I did a good job of not presenting white any unnecessary targets. I was debating knight d7, knight c6. Looks like knight f7 is also good, probably similar. I think getting that knight to e6, though, is really nice. Yeah, king up to e5. So even if white had played king d4, we can go knight c5, followed by knight e6 check. And again, you can see the effect of being up a pawn. White can just never trade down into a king and pawn ending. They're going to lose. This would be a draw if it was only the king, the d-pawn, and my king. Okay, but not with the other pawns on board, because eventually, this is going to be similar to the game, but eventually something like this will happen, or white runs out of moves to make. They have to give ground with their king, and then you can usually win in one of two ways. You can give up the pass pawn and go take your opponent's other pawns. You might have to do some counting just to make sure that, you know, they can't promote before you do. Here, it's not even close. Or, and this is the way that requires more calculation, but is usually cleaner actually, is put them in a pseudo stalemate. I think this is a mistake actually in this case, or is it? Oh, no, this is fine. Yeah, you can put them in a pseudo stalemate like this and then force them to tap into their pawn moves that give up the pawns. There's a risk of stalemate though. So for example, let's say white plays a4 here and we take b5, take. If white didn't have the kingside pawns to tap into, this would be a stalemate, right? So sometimes what happens is, let's say white goes b5 and these pawns all didn't exist on the other wing. Black would actually want to play a3 here and go get their own queen. Like so. And you can often checkmate them before they promote. You got to count it though, and it depends where the pawns are to start. So that's the other method to win if you don't want to jettison the pass pawn. So just use your judgment. Sometimes both of them work, but your judgment and calculation especially is going to really determine things. So that's why white is just sunk here. They can't ever trade down. They tried their best to get the bishop back towards attacking my pawns, but the bishop actually got trapped in doing so. Yeah, and we could analyze other permutations of this where white tries to defend with their king and their bishop for a while, but I'm going to check. My knight's going to probably get in, start winning pawns. White could put up some resistance, but yeah, feel free to play around with this if you want to see how black might win. White's getting pushed back, and as long as we're careful, black should win this. Good ending to test your technique on, though. Yeah, and I think this was nice. Knight d4, knight f5. Maybe pawn h5 is a better try for white. I'm trying to think what I would have done against that. Trying to swap down. Because I could go knight check and then knight e7, but I don't actually like letting them play h6. This is probably still winning because I control the g8 square, but I got to watch a sacrifice. Yeah, I guess this is winning because king f5 is a threat. That probably would have been a better chance for white, is to play h5, even if it doesn't ultimately change the result. But this was instructive how it went down. So knight d4, bishop g8, take the pawn with check. White gets the pawn back, but then the old backward knight move. Some of the toughest moves to see in chess are backward knight moves. Guarding the pawn on g6 and guarding that square on g8, and that bishop is toast. Yeah, and it looks like all these moves win. King f5. I mean, arguably this is the simplest. King f5, just go take this pawn and then go win the bishop. But yeah, I wanted to showcase how in a trap piece situation, also it's pretty simple to just in your head recognize that these pieces cancel each other out and use your advantage elsewhere to win. So that's the route I decided on. B5, running white out of moves. They used up all their pawn tempi, and it's just like we're ignoring this half of the board. That's all we're doing here. And again, this would be a draw if it was just king and pawn versus king, purely. But the presence of the other material is what sinks white. Yeah, and white lost the bishop. But let's say king d1, how I would win this. So here, I could put white in the pseudo stalemate again, king d3. But honestly, if we had gotten here, I probably would have played knight d5 and then gone for knight c3. So let the bishop out of prison and then just go check and promote with the defense from the knight. Yep. So bishop g8 played, we took the bishop, and white had some few last moves. Just don't stalemate them. Don't spoil, you know, a nice technical game like this by stalemating. Oh, cool. I was wondering if it was going to show the forced mate eval boxes too. Okay. I think that's about all I have to say about this game. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this one. I'm smiling because I've been very busy, and I have actually played a lot of chess this week. I did an over-the-board simul yesterday, which was exhausting. It was like a 5-hour simul. And I felt like my form was like, so-so in some of the games, but this game I'm pretty happy about. And I hope it was interesting for you guys, especially the technical portion, winning with an extra pawn. So some big picture stuff. If you're in a cramped position, you should be looking to trade down. Can't stress that enough. Try to swap down. And I think the decision-making, basically starting with knight e7, even if my position was worse, you could argue white helped me in a way by playing e4, helped me swap down. But if they don't play e4, I get to play knight f6 and clamp the e4 square myself. So, but watch out for tactics. Try to stay compact. I have to be aware, you know, when this pawn hit d5, that knight takes g6 stuff was in the air with the bishop operating towards my king. But look for trades and be vigilant for tactics at all times. And if you're on the side who is losing the momentum, don't compound the issue by continuing to press forward when your advantage has long gone. Okay? And I know sometimes you won't recognize when your advantage is long gone, but a lot of players play moves like knight e6 out of frustration, and they're playing hope chess. They're hoping that, you know, oh, maybe black will blunder rook f7, or maybe something with my pawn being down here, the attack on the knight is going to materialize. But that's where you really start to lose the thread definitively in a game. So you got to be disciplined, even when you've given back the lion's share of the advantage. So queen takes g7 itself, not so bad. Again, I probably would have played queen d2, but I really dislike knight e6 for the engine. That's a classic mistake, but that's what really costs you points and half points in your chess careers, those like frustration type moves. So Marina, I think you were frustrated with knight e6. All right, thanks so much for watching. Once again, I would love if you checked out Chessiverse, and let us know if you have any particular questions or comments. And do take a look at our premium memberships as well if you want access to all the bots. Anyone can play a bot for free, multiple bots actually, but if you want access to all 500, do check out the premium membership. They're pretty affordable. All right, thanks guys. Till next time. Bye.